I reject your offer. And honestly, your company is a joke. I stared at the email on the screen. It was sent from my account 20 minutes ago to the biggest tech company in Seattle. I didn't type a word of it. My sister Bianca did. She leaned against the counter, rubbing her pregnant belly like she hadn't just burned my entire future to the ground. You weren't going to leave us, Stella, she said, actually smiling. Who would pay for the new baby if you got some fancy job? We need you here. I didn't scream. I just stared at the timestamp. In that silence, the sister who had cleaned up her messes for 26 years died. And the compliance officer was born. Before I tell you exactly how I made sure Bianca would never touch a keyboard or my life again, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to see how far this story travels. I walked down the hallway to my bedroom, the floorboards groaning under my feet like they were in pain. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the roof. A relentless, rhythmic pounding that felt less like weather and more like a cage closing in. I locked the door and sat on the edge of my mattress. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I did what I do best. I audited. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, needing to see the full blast radius of my sister's entitlement. I expected damage. I didn't expect a crater. The number on the screen made my breath hitch. $18,500. It was sitting on a credit card I hadn't used in 3 years. A card I kept for emergencies. I clicked the transaction history. High-end baby furniture. Online gambling credits. A down payment on a truck for Todd. Bianca hadn't hacked the bank. She hadn't needed to. She had used my social security number to add herself as an authorized user to the account. She didn't even have to steal the physical card. She just waited for the new one to arrive in the mail and intercepted it before I got home from work. She had been bleeding me dry for months, and I had been too busy keeping the lights on to notice the darkness spreading in the accounts. I looked at the corner of my ceiling where a patch of black mold was slowly spreading, eating through the paint. I scrubbed it every weekend, but it always came back because the leak was in the foundation. That mold was my family. I am Stella, 26 years old. By day, I work as a compliance officer. I investigate corporate fraud. I track money laundering for a living. I can spot a shell company from 3 spreadsheets away. And yet, I had let 2 amateur grifters live in my house and rob me blind. For a long time, I beat myself up about that contradiction. How could I be so sharp at work and so blind at home? But I realized later that it wasn't stupidity. It was conditioning. There is a concept called betrayal blindness. It happens when the people you depend on for survival, or in my case, for love, are the same people hurting you. Your brain literally edits out the red flags to keep the relationship intact. I had been groomed since I was 7 years old to believe that my value wasn't in who I was, but in what I could provide. Grandma Agnes used to tell me that Bianca was the delicate one who needed protection, and I was the strong one who needed to carry the load. It wasn't just theft, it was financial incest. They had trained me to be a resource, a battery to be drained until it was empty. I stared at the $18,000 debt on the screen. They thought they had broken me. They thought that by sabotaging my job and burying me in debt, they had trapped me in this rotting house forever. They were banking on the old Stella, the little girl who just wanted to be a good sister. But that girl wasn't in the room anymore. They forgot that when you train someone to endure pain, you also train them to survive it. And when you force a compliance officer to look at her own life, she doesn't just see a tragedy. She sees a case file. I wasn't helping them anymore. I was feeding a parasite, and you don't negotiate with parasites. You exterminate them. I walked back into the kitchen. Bianca was gone, likely retreated to her room to spend the money she thought she'd saved by keeping me here. The iPad was still on the counter. I didn't turn it off. I didn't close the email app. I took it to my room and slipped it into the false bottom of my file cabinet. That wasn't just a tablet anymore. It was Exhibit A. In my line of work, we have a saying. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Well, this happened. And I was going to make sure a judge saw every pixel of it. I sat at my desk and pulled up my full credit report. It was a bloodbath. It wasn't just the $18,000 on the credit card. There were inquiries, hard pulls on my credit history from 3 different payday loan companies in the last 48 hours. Bianca wasn't just spending my money. She was leveraging my future. She had my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. She had the keys to my entire identity. That was the moment the cold reality hit me. I couldn't just pack a bag and leave. If I ran away tonight, Bianca would just keep using my name. She would max out every line of credit I had left, default on the loans, and leave me with a bankruptcy record that would disqualify me from ever working in finance again. She would burn my life down from a distance just to punish me for escaping. To be truly free, I didn't just need to move out. I needed to neutralize the threat. I needed to take her off the board completely. I looked at the Washington State Penal Code on my laptop. I wasn't looking for family law. I was looking for felonies. Petty theft wouldn't do it. That's a slap on the wrist in a family counseling session. I needed something that carried prison time. Something that would force the legal system to intervene and sever her access to me permanently. I scrolled until I found it. Grand larceny. The threshold was clear. If she stole enough, it wasn't a mistake, it was a crime that the state couldn't ignore. I began to formulate the plan. It had to be airtight. It had to be a trap so inviting, so perfectly tailored to her greed, that she wouldn't be able to resist it. I needed a honeypot. In cybersecurity, a honeypot is a decoy system you leave unguarded to trap hackers. You let them think they've found an easy way in. And while they're busy stealing what they think is valuable, you're logging their every move. Bianca thought I was weak. She thought I was stupid. She thought I was a broken ATM that would just keep spitting out cash if she kicked it hard enough. I was going to use that arrogance against her. I wasn't going to hide my money anymore. I was going to put it right in front of her face. And I was going to dare her to take it. The next morning, the house didn't wake up. It detonated. I was barely out of bed when a fist hammered against my bedroom door, shaking the frame in its jam. It wasn't a knock. It was a raid. Before I could even undo the lock, Bianca was shouting my name. Her voice pitched high in that frantic, weaponized panic she used whenever she needed something. I opened the door, and she pushed past me, pacing my small room like a caged animal. She looked terrible, eyes wide, hands shaking, but I knew better than to mistake withdrawal for fear. "I need $5,000, she said, spinning around to face me. "Right now. Today. It's an emergency." I stood by the door, arms crossed, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. "What kind of emergency costs $5,000 at 7 in the morning, Bianca?" "It's the baby," she lied, not even blinking. "There are complications. The doctor said I need a special procedure, and insurance won't cover it up front. Do you want your niece to die, Stella? Is that it?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. I didn't see a worried mother. I saw an addict, covering for an addict. I knew exactly where that money was going. Todd had been heavy on the sports betting apps all week. I'd seen the notifications light up his phone when he left it on the counter. He wasn't sick. He was in the hole. And the bookies were probably threatening to break his legs. But I didn't say that. I needed her to think I was still the gullible sister. "I don't have $5,000, Bianca," I said calmly. "You maxed out my credit cards. Remember?" Her face twisted. The mask of the victim dropped, revealing the bully underneath. She took a step closer, invading my personal space, using her pregnancy as a shield. "Don't lie to me. I know you have an emergency stash. I know about the cash in the lockbox." My blood ran cold. I kept that box hidden under the floorboards in the back of my closet. She hadn't just been spending my digital money. She had been tossing my room while I was at work. She had hunted through my underwear drawer, under my mattress, inside my closet. There was zero privacy here. I was living in a glass house, and she was holding the stones. "That's for emergencies," I said, letting my voice waver, playing the part of the cornered prey. "This is an emergency!" she screamed. Then she lowered her voice, which was infinitely scarier. "Look, Stella. You help me, or I call Grandma Agnes. I'll tell her you're back on the pills. I'll tell her you're unstable again. You know she still holds that power of attorney you signed when you were 18. One call from me, and she comes down here, declares you incompetent, and takes control of everything. Your bank accounts, your job, your life. Do you want that?" There it was. The nuclear option. The conspiracy. It wasn't just Bianca. It was a generational chokehold. Grandma Agnes was the enforcer. The one who had convinced me I was too fragile to handle my own affairs when I was a teenager. Bianca knew exactly where the kill switch was. I looked down at the floor, feigning defeat. I needed her to feel powerful. I needed her to think she had won, so she would get sloppy. "Don't call Grandma," I whispered. "Please. I'll see what I can do. I can't get it all today. But I can get close." Bianca smiled. It was a shark's smile. "See? I knew you'd be reasonable. Have it by tonight." She walked out, leaving the door open. She thought she had just extorted her little sister. She didn't realize she had just walked into the kill zone. I didn't go to work that morning. I went to the bank. I stood at the teller window, my posture straight, my voice level. $4,800, I said. Mixed denominations. Nothing larger than a 50. In Washington state, the threshold for grand larceny is $750. I didn't just want to cross that line. I wanted to obliterate it. I wanted a number so high that no judge in the county would grant bail on a personal recognizance bond. I took the thick envelope to a private study room at the public library. This was the tedious part. The part they don't show in movies. But it was the most important step in the chain of custody. I laid the bills out in rows of 10. I took high-resolution photos of every single serial number. Then I typed up an affidavit. I, Stella, hereby certify that the sum of $4,800 in cash, consisting of the following denominations and serial numbers, is my personal property stored within my home safe. I drove to a notary 3 towns over someone who didn't know my family and had it stamped. That stack of cash wasn't currency anymore. It was a marked deck. Next was the failsafe. Grandma Agnes. I walked into the county clerk's office and filed a revocation of power of attorney. The clerk stamped the document. 10:42 in the morning. That timestamp was my shield. I scanned the document and emailed a copy to Agnes's ancient Yahoo address. I knew she checked that email maybe once a month, if that. She wouldn't see it today. She would still think she held the leash. But in the eyes of the law, her power over me had expired the second that clerk's stamp hit the paper. If she tried to use that old POA now, she wouldn't be a guardian. She would be committing fraud. I returned to the townhouse just before noon. The silence was heavy, smelling of mildew and neglect. Bianca was likely still asleep or out spending the last of my credit limit. I opened my closet and pulled up the floorboard. I placed the cash inside the lockbox, making sure the envelope was thick, inviting, impossible to miss. I locked it. Now came the psychology. A trap only works if the prey thinks they've outsmarted the hunter. If I left the key on the kitchen counter, Bianca would smell a rat. She was paranoid, always looking for the angle. I had to make her work for it. But not too hard. I looked at my yellow raincoat hanging on the hook by the front door. It was raining hard outside, standard Seattle gray. I usually wore that coat every day. Bianca knew I kept my bus pass and loose change in the right pocket. I'd caught her digging in there a dozen times before. I slid the small brass key into the raincoat's pocket, nestled right next to a handful of quarters. I checked my watch. Ideally, I needed to look frantic. I messed up my hair slightly, grabbed my work bag, and shouted into the empty hallway. Damn it! I'm going to be late! I grabbed my umbrella, deliberately ignoring the raincoat. I opened the front door and stepped out into the downpour, letting the cold rain soak my blouse for a few seconds before opening the umbrella. I slammed the door shut behind me, leaving the coat and the key hanging there like a neon sign. I didn't look back. I walked down the street, turned the corner, and waited. The bait was in the water. Now I just needed the shark. I didn't go to work. I drove my car 2 blocks down, parked behind a row of overgrown hedges, and waited. My phone was in my lap, the screen dim, connected to a live feed that shouldn't have existed. Inside the townhouse, the trap was springing, but not in the way Bianca expected. She thought she was smart. She thought she was cautious. An hour ago, my nephew Leo had walked into the living room complaining about lag on his Xbox. He told her he needed to reset the router. Bianca, annoyed by his whining, had waved him off. She didn't watch him unplug the main fiber optic cable. She just saw the Wi-Fi lights go dark on the modem. To her, that meant the internet was down. To a thief, that meant the cloud-based security cameras, the Ring doorbell, the Nest in the hallway were blind. She checked her phone. No signal from the house cameras. Perfect. She thought she was invisible. She didn't know about the battery-operated spy cam I had magnetized to the inside roof of the lockbox itself. It wasn't connected to the Wi-Fi. It was recording directly to an SD card, capturing every grain of dust in 4K resolution. I watched the timestamp on my dash. 12:14 in the afternoon. My phone buzzed. A text from Leo. Target acquired. Raincoat. My stomach twisted. Not because of the money, but because of the boy sending the text. Leo was 15. He should have been worrying about geometry tests or varsity tryouts. Instead, he was acting as a double agent in his own home. This is the part of the story that no one tells you about standing up to a toxic family. It creates casualties. Leo wasn't just observing. He was actively betraying his mother to save his aunt. We call it the observer's gambit when a child in an abusive system realizes that the only way to survive is to become a silent operator, watching the adults destroy each other while calculating the safest exit route. I hated that I had to use him. I hated that he was good at it. He had learned to be invisible because being seen in that house meant being used. 12:18. I pictured Bianca slipping down the hall, digging into the yellow raincoat, feeling the cold key in her palm. She would lift the floorboard, open the box, and smile as she counted the cash, every bill recorded by the hidden camera. 12:22. She exited the townhouse, purse bulging now. Todd's sedan rolled up without killing the engine. She handed him the money, kissed him, and he sped off into the rain. My phone buzzed. Eagle has landed. Package is gone. She had taken the bait, committing a Class B felony without knowing it. I called 911, reported the theft, and described the getaway car. 2 blocks away, police stopped Todd for reckless driving and brought him back. When I arrived, Bianca was screaming at an officer on the porch. "Tell them you gave it to me," she shrieked. "It's a misunderstanding." The officer turned to me. "She says you authorized her." "I authorized nothing," I replied evenly. "She stole $4,800 from a locked safe." "She can't prove it," Bianca snapped. I handed over a manila envelope. "That affidavit certifies my ownership." Attached are photographs of the serial numbers. The officer compared them to the cash pulled from Todd's jacket. "It's a match." He turned to Bianca. "Hands behind your back." She panicked and called Grandma Agnes. Agnes arrived moments later, waving a binder. "I'm her legal guardian. She's unstable. I invoke a psychiatric hold." Bianca smirked until I raised my phone. "Check the timestamp," I told the officer. It was confirmation from the county clerk. "I revoked that power of attorney 48 hours ago. That document is void. Using it now is fraud." Agnes went pale. The officer stepped between her and Bianca. "Move back." Handcuffs snapped shut as Bianca screamed from the cruiser. Agnes stood stunned on the lawn while officers confiscated the binder and warned her obstruction charges were coming. Then the officer asked, "Who's responsible for the child?" Leo stood frozen on the porch. "I am," I said, handing over my ID. "He's coming with me." He crossed the yard and stood beside me. We drove away from the house and everything rotting inside it. In the months after, Bianca accepted a plea deal with restitution and rehab. Todd vanished. Agnes's fraud became public record. I moved downtown into a secure building and rebuilt my credit with police reports and affidavits. The debt disappeared. I enrolled Leo in a gifted students' boarding program for computer science. He wasn't a pawn anymore, just a kid who loved coding. Now I sit in my new living room, inbox clean, future intact. I didn't just survive my family, I audited them out of my life.